Want to mute out here.
All right, welcome to our New York Giants press
Carol, oh
science
wait,
meeting
I
for
got it.
today, December 13th. We're doing it on Wednesday. Very
Cheryl,
happy,
come here.
very happy to have Kerry Crowley will be addressing us tonight. Kerry was the Giants beat writer, and he started a brand new podcast YouTube show called Kerry Crowley Show. I seriously recommend any of you serious Giant fans, which you all are, to subscribe to the channel, to his program. It's fabulous. Really, really good. He thinks a lot like all of you guys think, which is a good thing. So we'll get to Kerry in a second. Just some news here. Next week we'll have Eddie Frierson. Eddie does the Christy Mathewson one-man show that he does around the country, mostly in the East Coast and California. But he's going to be talking about Christy Mathewson. The following week, we will have an end of the year wrap up. What's good in this organization, what's bad, what needs to be improved. And it'll be just a session for us to talk about the organization itself. I was called upon by a Sabre group in Cooperstown, New York, the Cliff Cacklin group. They have Sabre Day on February 4th at the Hall of Fame, and they asked me to come up there and speak to their group. So I'm going to go, and it should be very, very nice. And me going only, this is not for me, because they're asking me to speak about the book. And a good chunk of that book is about all you guys and our group. And all of you were acknowledged in the back. And all of the guest speakers, including Kerry's name, is in the back too. I went right to December 31st of who would be speaking. So anybody who's addressed this group on Zoom and in live are in the book. So just so you're aware of that. I am working on the last edition of our Polo Grounder newsletter. That'll be out before Christmas. Just to thank you to anybody who's read the book and left those very nice reviews. I can't thank you enough. A lot of you wrote some really positive things, and it really means a lot to me. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Kerry Crowley. Kerry is going to talk to us about his career following the Giants, then about his new great program, and then it's just going to be you're raising your hand, and he will answer the best he can, which will be, I think, will be very entertaining and informative to all of you. So why don't we all introduce Kerry? Let's greet Kerry Crowley. Kerry, despite this being a New York Giants Preservation Society meeting, 95% of the people in this group still root for the Giants, and I don't think you'd find better fans than what you're going to deal with tonight. Floor is yours, Kerry.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that, Gary. I want to introduce myself and thank everyone here for having me tonight, and for Gary for the invitation. My name's Kerry Crowley. I'm a fifth-generation San Franciscan, and I currently actually live on the East Coast in New Jersey, but I spent 5 seasons covering the San Francisco Giants for KNBR, the radio station, the flagship station of the San Francisco Giants, and the Bay Area news group San Jose Mercury News. I was a beat reporter from 2018 to 2021. My first season on the beat was with KNBR in 2017, when the Giants famously lost 98 games in a year that everyone probably tuned out by July. My last year on the beat was when they won a franchise record 107 games. And so people like to tell me that I was the good luck charm after the World Series era. Never got them back to the mountaintop, but I took them from 98 losses all the way up to 107 wins. So I had the privilege of covering the end of Bruce Bochy's tenure in San Francisco. I was there in the dugout in Scottsdale in spring training when he announced that he was retiring from the San Francisco Giants. And I can say with full certainty that he intended to stay retired until the Texas Rangers came calling back a few years ago. And I was there the day that the Giants fired Bobby Evans. I was there in the hallway at Oracle Park when that happened, walking by Bobby Evans as he was relieved of his duties, and Larry Baer announcing that the Giants would pursue a next generation president of baseball operations in Farhan Zaidi. And I know how some of you probably feel about how that next generation has gone thus far. Believe me, I feel the same way as many of you. And I also had the privilege of covering the 107 win season in 2021, which to me was incredible because I got to spend the entire month of September studying the 1962 race between the Giants and the Dodgers and drawing on the historical parallels that I think were so fascinating to see unfold during the 107 win season. And so since that time, I stepped away from the beat, but I still host shows on KMBR. I still work regularly with Marty Lurie, talking baseball on the weekends. If any of you have listened to Marty's show, I've also worked with Bill Lasky on the postgame show on KMBR for the last several years on the weekends. And tomorrow night on KMBR, I'm hosting a Giants hot stove show with rookie Casey Schmidt is going to be my guest tomorrow evening. Unfortunately, that won't be until 10:30 Eastern time, though. So I'll be up quite a lot later than I'm accustomed to being up, as I host all my shows from right here in my office in New Jersey. So just a little bit about my thoughts on the current state of the San Francisco Giants and what I'm currently doing to cover the team before we open it up to questions. I think that everyone here could probably agree the 2022 and 2023 seasons were some of the most disappointing that we've all seen during our lifetimes of Giants baseball, and not necessarily because of the record. The Giants have had losing seasons before. They'll have losing seasons again. But to me, the 2022 and 2023 seasons were incredibly boring, and they gave us very little reason to want to watch Giants baseball and to want to follow the team and to stay engaged and to stay in love with a team that I know all of you have probably loved your whole lives or adopted at some point throughout your lives. And as a fifth generation San Franciscan, this is through my blood. My grandfather taught my mom about Willie Mays when, he had seen Willie Mays play at the Polo Grounds and then out at Seal Stadium in Candlestick Park. She was there in 1989 when the earthquake, stopped the World Series. And so she passed her love of the Giants on to me. Her favorite player, aside from Willie Mays, Willie McCovey. My favorite player growing up, aside from Barry Bonds, was Tim Lincecum. And watching him pitch, I wore number 55. I think so many of us remember such fond seasons, even when the Giants were losing, when Tim Lincecum was on the mound. And so seeing him win a World Series, ending the 52-year drought in San Francisco in 2010 was really incredible. But to get to the current state of the organization, I started a podcast and a YouTube show that Gary referenced a few minutes ago, a few weeks ago, or a few months ago now. I started it because I had a sense from all the Giants fans that I was growing up with and had gone to games with that they no longer felt the same way about the organization, or they felt like the organization was ignoring them and that they didn't feel the same connection to the team that maybe they once did when Buster Posey was the catcher, when Madison Bumgarner was on the mound and the bullpen gate swung open in 2014. And it wasn't just because of the losing, it was because there are no stars on this team. There are no players that make you say, I really want to watch Giants baseball today, outside of maybe a Logan Webb or a Camilo Doval, but they haven't had the position players that we've all been accustomed to seeing. And since 1958, this is an organization that came to San Francisco with Willie Mays. It engaged the community in San Francisco with, in my opinion, the greatest player to ever put on a jersey. And then you had Juan Marichal and Willie McCovey. And in the 1970s, which is probably the worst era of Giants baseball in San Francisco, they still had Vita Blue. They still had Jack Clark coming through the farm system and ready to make a difference. And, you go through that 85, 100 loss season, and you come out of it with Will Clark and a player to watch immediately and someone who made you fall in love with the game again. 1993, we all know what happens. The Giants threaten to move, and then Peter McGowan saves the team. They sign Barry Bonds, and the last 30 years of Giants baseball, save for the last two, have been full of stars who've given the city, given people all over the country who follow Giants baseball a reason to stay tuned in and a reason to say, this is my favorite team, and I'm proud of this team that they put on the field every night. And so I think that this year's offseason is the most important in potentially all of San Francisco Giants history, because you're at a point where Giants fans no longer feel the same way about the franchise, and you have to give them a reason to watch. We all saw games at Oracle Park this season where there were empty bleachers and fans not showing up. And the Giants need to be compelling, they need to be entertaining, and ultimately they need to be competitive to be worth your investment and all the time that you've put in throughout your lives into pouring, your heart and soul into watching Giants baseball, staying up late on the East Coast for many of you. They need to make it worthwhile. And so, no, they didn't land Shohei Ohtani. Of course, he's got the $700 million deal with the Dodgers, but I think that they have an opportunity now to upgrade their roster, bring stars to San Francisco, and make sure that this team is something that everyone who's invested their lives and time into Giants baseball can be proud of. And so that's why I started my show on YouTube. I talk a lot about the history of the organization, the players who've come through the organization, and what the organization needs to do next to make sure that next year, come 2024, when spring training happens and I make my trip down to Scottsdale, that I can come back on with you guys and Gary and talk about a team that has a chance. Because the worst thing is going into spring training thinking that your team doesn't have a chance. And the last 2 years, think about April, May, we all had a pretty good feeling that things weren't trending in the right direction. So I would love to answer your questions about the organization, about my experience covering the team, knowing Bruce Bochy, Buster Posey, anyone from 2017 to 2021 during the era that I was traveling with the Giants, and kind of open up the floor to anyone who has questions about the current state of the franchise and where it's headed. So, Gary, do you want to
I'll
facilitate
take
that?
care of it. I just want to mention again, do yourself a favor, subscribe. Kerry didn't not putting me up to this. I'm telling you because I watch it all the time. Kerry, one thing, how often are there is your show?
It used to be twice a week, but in the last few weeks, I've started to do shorter shows about every other day. So if you hit the subscribe button on the YouTube page, and I think Gary will email that out, you'll get an email when the videos go up. So I'm trying to do something every 2 days or so right now.
Terrific. I guess I'll start it off. Just one comment. That 107, I just got a feeling that's just going to be put on our heads until they get good again, because I'm kind of tired about hearing about 107. Not from you, just I think from the organization. It's, hey, we won 107 games. You know what? It's just, in my opinion, everything happened to work well that year, and that's just how it is,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Today I read something that their farm system is ranked like close to 20 now. Am I wrong about that?
The farm system rankings are subjective, and some of them take into account depth, and some of them take into account overall prospect quality at the very top. I think that the Giants farm system is better off now than it was 5 years ago, but it's not where it should be. So it's not a top five system. It's probably not a top 7 or 8. It might be in the 10 to 15 range, but I think that for all the losing that the Giants have had to do since really 2015 on, you'd like it to be in a better position than it is right now.
So why isn't the C Farhan held more accountable for that?
That
I,
starts with the ownership. It's Greg Johnson and the Giants' very complex group of 30 owners. A lot of sports franchises, there's one owner of the team, and the buck stops with them. You know who's making the decisions. The Giants have a really complex ownership group, which in many ways is a good thing. But I think at a time like this, it can sometimes be a hindrance because Greg has to, check with the board and check with other people and decide how they want to spend, how they want to allocate their resources in any given time. And I don't think with the way that they're building Mission Rock outside of Oracle Park right now, that in the last 4 or 5 years, they've been comfortable spending the way you need to actually spend to field a competitive baseball team. And so they hired Farhan, who was known for improving the margins of the roster, making your 24th and 25th player on the roster better. And now he's got to make the top 5 players on the roster better. Now he's got to give Logan Webb a teammate who he can say, hey, if you're not starting today, I'm going to start and throw 7 innings and strike out 10 batters.
Yeah,
Or,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, I am eagerly anticipating the next week or so. Or at least I'm hoping that. But based on, I don't see how ownership can accept signing basically 6 free agents last year and all of them being just horrific. I mean, really, Jock Pete, how do you resign Jock? How do you resign a part-time DH for 19 million? How does ownership allow that?
Because if ownership's not going to spend the $30 million that it would have taken to get a good player, they're going to try and cut corners. And I think that the Giants have tried to cut corners too often over the last few seasons. And so this is why this offseason is so important, because you can't cut corners.
Perfect. The other thing I had on your cast, you have said that, look, if they're not going to sign these good hitters, which there aren't really, or trade for them, that you would love to see them beef up the starting rotation. And the guys you spoke about, I totally agree with you. I would love to have 4 good starters, none of these, opener nonsense. And, you play that, you play good defense, and hopefully they got to let these young guys play. You're interviewing Casey Schmidt. I'd rather see them go with him than spend money on Chapman. I mean, because you have a lot of money, it doesn't mean you have to spend it. You got to spend it wisely.
Yeah, you got to spend it wisely. And one thing I'd say about the way that they've spent is they spread their money around a little bit. And in free agency, you're going to hit some, you're going to miss some. Last year they missed because they weren't willing to, well, they were willing to, with Carlos Correa, put all their eggs in one basket, but then their medical team wasn't willing to sign off on it. So you got to do a little more research ahead of time.
All right, enough from me. Jeff, you are up.
Thanks, Gary. Kerry, thanks for joining us. Welcome to my home state of New Jersey. Getting to have the difficulty of staying up at night past like the 5th inning during the season. I have a comment and then I have a question for you. Oh, and by the way, I've subscribed to your channel. I've seen every episode and I love it, and keep up the good work. My comment, I just saw right before the meeting started on MLB Network, as if the Ohtani thing isn't crazy enough, MLB Network is saying that the Associated Press is reporting that if either Friedman or whoever the majority Dodger owner is, I forget the name that they put it there, if either one of them lose their positions within his 10-year contract, he can pull out of his contract.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't crazy enough, we have that added to it.
Well, here's the other thing
as
about
far as the Giants.
Real quick, Jeff, the contract is going to set him up to follow in Buster Posey's footsteps. 10 years from now, Shohei Ohtani will be owning the Dodgers when he retires. That's how this is set up. So just to make that clear.
Okay. As far as our new center fielder, obviously none of us have seen this guy play. We've seen some video clips. We've seen, some of the World Baseball Classics, but, we don't really know what we're getting per se, despite all of the good things that so many people have said about him. From what you've heard, from what you've seen, from the videos, what's your honest assessment at this point, having not seen this guy in person play? Do you think it was a good spend or what?
I think that he's going to be an exciting leadoff hitter who will play every day. So you're not going to get 30 home runs from Jung-Hoo Lee, who the Giants signed last night, 6 years, $113 million. He's not going to be a middle of the order bat, but what he is going to do is play every day. You're not going to see the platoons you saw with Gabe Kapler. You're not going to see him be pinch hit for. He brings speed to the game, and he's a very different player because he's fast and he plays center field, but he has the ability to make contact like Pablo Sandoval could make contact. So if there's a pitch outside the strike zone that you want to take to left field and he's a left-handed hitter, he can do that. And I think that that's something that the Giants were missing the last few seasons, is so many of their players were swinging for the fences. This is someone who wants to put the ball in play, get it to Triples Alley at Oracle Park, and get moving. And I really like that idea because there was just too many strikeouts the last few seasons. So he's someone who doesn't strike out a whole lot and is fast. And to me, that's exciting.
Yeah, career-wise, he's walked more than he's struck out. I think they said his strikeout is 5% in his
Yeah.
7-year career.
Very low.
I'll take that.
Yeah. And that
All right,
includes
thank
when
you.
he's 18 or 19 years old. So it's impressive.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Weinberg, you are up.
Well, Kerry, I seem to recall that I followed you when you were writing in San Francisco. I followed you on, it used to be called Twitter. I don't know what it's called today. It changes every day. They're down to X, then they're going to go to Y and then Z, I guess. But I have a couple of questions. Did you see Andy Baggerly's column in The Athletic about his interview with Buster?
I did. Yeah. Tremendous work.
What's your take on that?
Well, for some background for anyone who hasn't read it, Buster Posey talked a little bit about how free agents perceive that San Francisco isn't the most desirable city to live in right now. And look, I'm from the city. I think it's the most beautiful place in the world. So I'm going to be a little bit biased in saying that, look, I traveled on the beat to every city in America. I saw New York, Chicago, LA, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. The bottom line is, if you're making $300 million, as some of these players are now making, the problems that the average person in a city deals with are not what you deal with. You've got a ride to the ballpark. You live in a suburb in a beautiful house. You're going out to five-star restaurants. It's not impacting the players that they're trying to sign.
So why didn't Shohei sign with the Giants?
Because
they supposedly offered him the same deal.
Let's be honest. Who's going to win more over the next 10 years?
You want my answer?
You think the Giants?
Well, that's why I've only rooted for them for 70 years. Why the hell am I think I'm going to stop now?
That's the spirit. I love that. Look, it's entirely possible, but
if you want to get into a discussion between what the Dodgers did and what the Giants did, I mean, this century, the Giants got 3 World Championships. How many did the Dodgers have? I could do that.
I don't count.
Norm will help me out on this, but
yeah. But
no, I don't mean to take it away, Kerry.
Great.
No, continue what you were saying. I shouldn't have interrupted.
No, I just think that if you are a baseball player who's about to enter your prime and you think that there's 2 franchises who are offering you the same amount of money, one, you don't have to move. You can stay in your same home. You can keep your routine. All you got to do is travel to a different workplace every day. And that team has won 100 games for seemingly a decade, even if they don't win in the postseason. I think that it's a pretty easy call to not uproot your life. We look at it differently because we grew up with the Giants, and we follow the Giants on a daily basis. We think it's crazy that anyone would sign anywhere else. Look, if any of us had played Major League Baseball, I think the answer is easy who you'd want to play for. But for someone who's already living there, I don't think it was ever too realistic.
And I have another. You mentioned Casey Schmidt.
Mm-hmm.
He showed signs last year of being a superstar. That's the way I saw it.
Yeah.
When you interview him, you say you're going to interview him tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night.
I don't know. Here's what I would ask him. He ended the season, his last game. He hit 2 home runs in that game. And he was on deck when the game ended. If I remember right. Gary, help me out here, right?
He was.
Yeah. He looked like he had found his stroke. I really wanted to see him get that next at bat. What did he do? Ask him, what did he do? Because he came up, he was hitting seriously about 800, and then he went down to below 200.
Yeah.
But he seemed to regather himself and go back on the positive track. What's your take on it?
Well, it's so hard when you're facing major league pitching and they figure out that you can't hit a certain pitch. I think that happened to Casey Schmidt, and he got in his own head and felt like he had to swing at everything
Yeah.
because the league adjusted. But by the end of the season, he just looked more calm. And when you do it 400 times, 500 times, 600 times, like he may have the opportunity to do next season, maybe we'll see the version we saw at the end of the season where he was looking calm and cool and collected, because I saw him in spring training, Harvey, and he looked like he was ready to go. I saw him hit a 400-foot home run against the Cubs in Mesa. My goodness, I thought he should have been on the opening day team. So it's so difficult for the rookies and the first-year players. But once they start to figure it out, then we'll tell if they can become a superstar. So it's a huge year for him. I'll ask him. I'll definitely ask him.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you.
Kerry, piggybacking on that, we watched a third baseman come up who was totally lost hitting, and that was Matt Williams.
Yes.
How can you think Matt Williams, having gone through that experience, could help Schmidt out a lot?
Yeah. And I also think having Pat Burrell back in the dugout as a hitting coach can help too. I think these guys, especially the really young ones, are going to benefit from coaches who've played in the major leagues. And that's not to take anything away from the group that helped the 2021 season with getting the most out of Buster Posey, Brandon Belt, and Brandon Crawford. I think that those coaches really understood the things that you can do to extend your career and just evolve as players. But the young guys need to hear from the players who've been there and done that before. So I love that Matt Williams and Pat Burrell are on the staff.
And if you didn't know, Harvey, of course, rooted for the Giants when they played here in New York. Norm, you were up.
Kerry, thank you so much for being here with us. I love your podcast, and I love listening to you and Marty Lurie.
Thank you.
Now, Harvey took the bulk of my question, but I want to get more specific on that in terms of San Francisco being a place where players don't want to come.
Yeah.
And my assertion is, if you are a family member, you've got a wife and kids, you're not necessarily going to live in San Francisco. You're going to live on the peninsula or in the East Bay. And so I'm curious if you have some kind of an idea about the percentage of players who actually live in San Francisco or outside of San Francisco.
For the people who sign long-term contracts with the Giants, so that could be a Logan Webb who, does an extension with the Giants and knows that he's going to be here for 5 years. It could be a Mitch Haniger who signs a 3-year deal in free agency. Those players are almost never living in San Francisco. A lot of them lived in the East Bay, a few of them in the peninsula. I think that the only players who are typically living in San Francisco are living out of the Hotel Via right across the street from the ballpark. When they come into town from AAA Sacramento and they don't know if they're going to be here for a month or just a day, they stay at Hotel Via, which is, by the way, a great hotel. I'm not paid by them. I don't do any ads for them, but if they wanted to sponsor me, I'd sure take it. I've been in that hotel, and that's a pretty good living you're making as a major leaguer, living there for free.
They have a really nice bar too. I can speak for that.
They do. They do. That's where I've been.
Okay, well, thank you, Kerry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Norm. Kerry, if you don't know, Norm has every San Francisco Giant autograph since the inception of the franchise moving to San Francisco. Norm, how many is that?
It's 1,050 or so, plus all the managers, coaches, and radio broadcasters.
That's
and
incredible.
GMs.
You got to get some pregame host broadcasts there.
I got Marty Lurie.
Yeah.
I should get you.
Ship me the ball.
All right. Mr. Manis, you are up. You got to unmute, Howard. Howard, unmute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. Hey, Kerry, I'm in New Jersey. I live in Jersey, just like you. Whereabouts in Jersey do you live?
I'm in Princeton. Yeah, my girlfriend's in Prattville here.
I'm in Middlesex County, just a little bit north of you in Sayreville. And these days I'm a Met fan, but I grew up as a Giant fan. I have family down in Los Altos. My daughter and her
Beautiful.
husband and my new granddaughter. I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and it's a beautiful area down there. I grew up in the Bronx, within walking distance of the Polo Grounds, but I'm a little too young to really remember the New York Giants. I saw the Giants and Willie when they came to play the Mets in '62 and '63, and then after that I ended up in Queens the year that they moved to Shea. I wanted to respond to something that you said though about it's been tough the last couple of years with them. You know, I grew up in the 1960s when I was a diehard Giant fan, like Gary, 3,000 miles away. Those were tough years. The team was great every year, but they never won it. I mean, the
Yep.
Dodgers, you know, they had Koufax, they had Drysdale, they had all God knows what other pitchers they had there, that was frustrating. Yeah, they won that playoff in '62, and I saw on TV the final game. Willie threw it into right field. He caught the last out. He was in right field and threw it away, just flung it. And they were going to beat the hated Yankees. We hate the Yankees. I was 6 blocks from Yankee Stadium when I was in the Bronx, and we hated the Yankees. And it took me to this day. I haven't gotten over Game 7 in Candlestick with McCovey's line drive right into Bobby Richardson. I went to a memorabilia show back, I guess, in the 90s or something, and I met Richardson. He actually apologized to me. He said, "I'm sorry I let you down." And I explained to him I was a Giant fan, diehard. It was very frustrating being a Giant fan. They had the superstars. They had Mays McCovey. They had Jim Ray Hart, Hal Lanier. I mean, they were great teams, and it was either the Dodgers and then the Cardinals would beat them in '67 after they got rid of Cepeda. So I grew up, you know, like Gary, 3,000 miles away. I eventually gravitated towards the Mets. My brother was a beat writer covering the Mets for the Morristown Daily Record
Wow.
up in Morris County. He covered the Mets when they got Willie, and he interviewed Willie in the Mets clubhouse. He was there for Willie Mays' night when they retired. When he retired. He was also there when they had Willie Mays. They gave him all the gifts and everything, and he was there for the World Series in Oakland. He saw the games. He saw Willie's last hit, basically. So I have a history with the San Francisco Giants, more so than the New York Giants. My father goes back to Carl Hubble, so it runs deep in my family. But I just wanted to respond saying, I know it's been tough, but still, I celebrated with you guys in 10, 12, and 14. And one of my greatest moments as like a kind of a fake Giant fan was I was out there on vacation, and one of the years they didn't win, 2011. I went to my first ever Giant Dodger game in person. It was a bad season for the Giants. I think it might have been 13, and the Giants beat them that weekend, the game that I went to. So that was in the current ballpark. So I have a history of another generation. I admire the Giants to this day, kind of like, I don't know, I have a soft spot for them. Let me put it that way. And right now I'm suffering with the Mets. I don't think they're doing anything in the offseason right now. I don't really follow the Giants that closely in the offseason, you know, but I certainly wish them well. And I appreciate the job that you're doing here in New Jersey for the people out in the Bay Area. And hopefully, you know, maybe the Dodgers will, I don't know. He's not pitching next year, right? Holani. So maybe the Giants can come up and make it close. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Howard. And your comment about your brother interviewing Willie Mays reminded me of one of my favorite conversations I ever had when John Shea was writing 24, the great Willie Mays biography. He introduced me to Willie down in the clubhouse in Scottsdale. And I played football growing up, and John told Willie told me stories about him playing quarterback in high school in Alabama. He was a multi-sport star athlete when he was growing up. And Willie, I think he was, you know, probably 89 years old. This was what, 3-4 years ago, and he could still remember the plays from high school football. So that was very cool.
You know, when my daughter first got married and moved to San Francisco, she lived in San Francisco, and she lived a couple of blocks away from USF near the Golden Gate Park.
Great
and I was
area.
telling her all about Bill Russell. Bill who? She didn't know. But I actually went inside the stadium near the field house. I don't know if that's the same one that Russell played in as a collegiate. But so San Francisco is a part of me right now with my daughter in Los Altos. And, you know, the memories I have of being there and rooting for the San Francisco Giants. So, again, thank you for appearing tonight with us. And yeah, I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, Howard.
Sure.
Gary, now that, you know, you're on the East Coast, but just if I was a Met fan, I'd be a little scared right now. Every time every time I look at MLB trade rumors, I see them signing all of these guys we never heard of. he looks like Stearns looks like Farhan Jr. to me. I don't know. I don't know who the Mets are signing. Just a lot of
neither do we.
unknown guys. Terrible.
Oh, no, either.
Uh,
That's why these days I'm rooting for the New York Giant football team, and they're winning a couple of games now. It's been a rough football season here too, but yeah, the Mets are. I don't know where
Thanks,
they're going.
Howard. We're going to call on Larry Simi. Larry is new to our group. He lives out in San Francisco. Larry, welcome aboard.
Gary, thank you so much. And Kerry, thanks for coming on. And it's a pleasure to meet you. I have to ask you who your parents are, though.
FX and Nancy Crowley.
FX is dad. Yeah, I kind of saw the resemblance. So
Yeah, everyone says I sound just like him. So
I've known him for a long time. I knew your grandfather, and yeah, so that's fascinating.
That's incredible.
But I got a question, and that is, you alluded to the Giants' kind of, bizarre ownership structure, and I'm just curious as to what the relationship is and what the power dynamics are between Johnson and Larry Baer, and then how Farhan fits into all that. But it seems like Larry Baer is kind of, I mean, he's there, but he's not there anymore.
Yeah, he is not involved in any baseball decisions. So Larry's not authorizing signings. Larry's not making decisions on, if they're hiring another member of the coaching staff. He's not authorizing anything to do with payroll. He is now on the business side of the operation. And that's completely separated from baseball. So what Greg Johnson does is he is designated as the control person or the chairman of the baseball side for the Giants. And so because he's got the controlling part of the ownership, which still isn't 50%, he is the person who goes back to the other owners and figures out the budget that they're going to set for the season. The Giants pretty much give Farhan the autonomy to make moves with that budget, much like other organizations do. There's just a little bit more maneuvering with the Giants, and especially because of their Mission Rock development. And so, they had to pay off the ballpark at 24 Willie Mays Plaza. They've done that, and now they're trying to build the real estate around the ballpark. I think some of their capital has been tied up in that, so that's why we've seen lower payrolls in recent years. But the hope is more businesses move in around Mission Rock and the Giants, expand their real estate portfolio. As crazy as it sounds, this does matter for the bottom line. The hope is that they'll have more payroll moving forward so that they can sign better players. But they pretty much give Farhan the authority to make all decisions with regard to baseball. And the only thing that he needs to run by them are bigger decisions. So I'd say anything like above, a $15 million a year player. So they're signing Jung-Hoo Lee yesterday. Ownership has a good idea that that's happening. If they claim a player off of waivers, Greg Johnson is just as surprised to learn that name as you and I are when they claim a player off waivers, which is way too often.
The reason I asked the question, Kerry, is that when the Giants were riding high, success on the field, yes, but also they were a model business organization.
Absolutely.
They were like, General Motors and, all the big corporations could have learned from them. And it just doesn't seem like marketing, there's a whole lot of areas that the team just doesn't seem to do as well as when Larry was in charge.
Well, I'll also tell you this, with Peter McGowan in charge and when Bill Newcomb was in charge, the Giants also paid the employees on the business side of the operation better than they do right now. I became friends with a lot of people on the business side, just running into them at Oracle Park, being there every day. There's a lot of people in the Giants organization who could leave for another industry and make better money, and that happens from time to time. And the Giants would be wise, I think, to pay the day-to-day employees who keep the operations running on the business side at Oracle Park better. And I also think that there'd be less turnover within the organization, and they'd be a little bit more like the model organization that you were talking about, Larry. I think in the first probably 15 years of the 2000s, they really operated as the envy of other organizations in baseball.
Thank you, Larry. Audrey West, you were up there.
Hi, Kerry. Native San Franciscan here, and we've had season tickets for 35 years. Larry, you asked my first question. I was going to ask you, what in the world does Larry Bear do? We hate him. And I'm glad that he isn't involved in any baseball decisions, because all we have to do is see his face and we just turn off the volume. But anyway, the other question I was going to ask you is, what in the heck happened at KNBR last week?
Yeah, well, I'm a freelance employee at KNBR, and I'm still hosting shows. Unfortunately, there's been major changes in the local radio scene in San Francisco, and a lot of it is due to the decline in the number of listeners in radio. The fact that AM radio and KNBR has been known as an AM signal forever, even though they do have an FM station, it's just dwindled in terms of the number of people who are listening, and so they can't support the budget that they once did. And a company based in Atlanta that pays me, so don't let this get back to them, made some horrendous decisions. They, instead of renegotiating contracts, let go of people who've, put in their entire careers at KNBR and trying to make it what it is, and people who've devoted themselves to being out at the ballpark and telling the story of Giants baseball, being out at the 49er stadium, telling the story of 49ers football. And I was really, really upsetting to see, if you want my honest opinion. I mean, I had friends who lost jobs, Paul McCaffrey, FP Santangelo. I grew up listening to Murph and Mac every morning. It's a staple in my household. And it was a really, really gutting week for me personally. So it was a decision made in an office in Atlanta, and I think that it impacts people in the Bay Area, and that's what's really unfortunate.
Thanks.
You got it.
Thank you, Audrey. Charles, you are up.
Yeah, I wanted to say, if you ever have a chance to go out for lunch with Gary, go for it. We had so much fun the other night. It was just awesome. Thank you. And I read your whole book on the plane back to San Francisco. I was just out in New York for a few days.
Thank you, Charles.
I missed half of this, but I saw you talking about Casey Schmidt. The other player who I wanted to ask you about, who I kind of liked, but who kind of didn't, I don't think he met his potential, was David VR. I wanted to ask you what you thought of him.
Yeah, David VR can't hit a breaking ball, unfortunately. Okay. I love his power, and I think that he gives the Giants an element when he's thrown a fastball that they don't have, to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And I think he plays more solid defense than he's probably given credit for. Really nice guy, good teammate too, is what everyone says about him. He cannot hit a breaking ball. And so until
and it's not something that he can learn how to do either.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough road. Yeah. So that's the short of it.
That's unfortunate, but that's part of baseball.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. Next we have the judge. The judge last year, Kerry, was huge. He must have seen the same game you saw with Casey Schmidt spring training, because he was touting him all year. Judge, you are up.
I'm going to surprise you then, Gary. I have a Casey Schmidt question. So, Kerry, the struggle is we want to see the team get younger, more athletic. So you want to give these guys a chance to see what they can do. You don't want to block them, but by the same token, you understand you could end up with another David VR. So after September of 22, I was very comfortable with VR having a third base job. By May, you can see this was not going to end well, likely. So this year, when I hear things about them maybe signing Chapman, and I'm thinking, well, what are we going to do with Casey Schmidt? He really should be playing third, not short or second. So he's supposed to be such an excellent, and he is an excellent glove. So if you bring Chapman in, I don't know what you do with Schmidt. And by the same token, J.D. Davis played surprisingly well last year, both with the glove and the bat. I don't think Chapman would give you he'd give you more with the glove. I don't think he'd give you a whole lot more with the bat. So to sign him to a big contract doesn't make a lot of sense. So the short of that is, what do you do at third base next year?
I think it's a really difficult question. This is why I host a show and I don't work for a baseball team. I'm totally honest in saying that I am not qualified to give you the best answer to that question. But what I will say is the value of a Matt Chapman is the Giants for the last few years have had these platoons where, JD Davis is facing left-handed pitching and he is never really proven himself over a 6-year major league career as someone who can hit righties as well, who can play 150 games in a season, who is going to be consistent defensively for more than just a year. And you guys probably remember the name Kevin Franzen. He played a little bit for the Giants. He's a broadcaster for the Phillies. He told me that he never believed any baseball stats until people did the same thing for 2 seasons in a row. And so he said someone could be in the major leagues for 4 years and they could do something different in each of those 4 years. They could hit 30 home runs, they could have a 300 average, but if it was never consistent, you couldn't count on them to do anything the next season. And so I think with JD Davis, the hard part is he's never done something 2 years in a row. Whereas Matt Chapman has always played Gold Glove defense. And for the most part, he's hit 20 home runs. Pretty consistently throughout his major league career, you can count on 20 home runs. And so the idea, if the Giants sign him, is they're knowing what they're going to get. And is that expensive? Yes, but it's not our money. So I'm always in favor of them spending more. But you would also then probably trade Casey Schmidt and you'd send him to another organization that can give you a pitcher and you load up your rotation with starters, because I think that the path moving forward is great defense, more athleticism. Chapman has all of that, and a rotation that can combat Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Shohei Ohtani, because the number one thing you want to avoid is them getting the bat on the ball. So I think all the Giants' money should be spent on run prevention and winning low-scoring ball games like they did in 2010 and 2012. Those years, I mean, they took years off of our lives, but they were worth it.
One real quick beyond
yeah.
that. Schmidt, Luciano, and Matos, 3 guys who flashed last year. Who do you not want to block? Who should get the chance to show that they're a major leaguer of those 3? Looks like they're going to do Luciano, but
yeah. It's tough because Marco Luciano is 22 and he's got back problems. And those typically don't go away over the course of your career. So he's going to be potentially dealing with injuries. Luis Matos needs another year to get stronger. The person I probably believe in the most is Casey Schmidt, but he's a little older than those guys. And so maybe it's just because he's older that he looks more, ready to be a major league player on an everyday basis. The guy who has the potential to be the biggest star is Luciano, though. And so if you want star power, if you want someone who can potentially hit 30 home runs for you one day, the best bet of those 3 players to do that is Marco Luciano.
Yeah, I think they're tempted to give him the shortstop job, but you can see him taking off, but you can also envision May coming around and he's hitting 160 and striking out 50% of the time.
Yep.
It's it's tough decisions. They really
be hitting second or hitting 9th by May.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge. Neil, you are up.
Hi, everybody. I'm new here, although I've been listening in for the last couple of months. It's wonderful listening to Giant fans with New York City accents. I really appreciate it. I'm from Brooklyn, although my wife and I just moved back to the area. We've been in Washington, D.C. for 55 years. I wanted to mention 2 things. One, someone earlier, I think it was Larry perhaps, talked about the 1960s. And the 1960s was very depressing, but it also had the most depressing moment of being a Giants fan. And I was Giants fan since 1961 when I was 51 when I was 6 years old, and we all went crazy, of course. But my dad, who was a fanatical Giant fan, would take us to spring training in Scottsdale, and then I think Casa Grande, or a combination of the 2. And for 4 or 5 years, every time we went to spring training, we met George Foster. We stayed in the same hotels as the players did. So George Foster was his rookie, who we thought was terrific. My dad was pretty good at scouting players, and he never made the team. And one year, the year he made it, I believe it was 71. I may be wrong about the date, but he had a spring training that was quite unbelievable. He was hitting shots that were hitting the mud wall in the Phoenix Scottsdale Stadium that you could hear thuds outside the game. And he made it. He had a great few weeks with the Giants, and then they traded him to Cincinnati. And my brother and I were inconsolable. It was a worse feeling than when the Giants left in '57. So that's was my, I think the word is nadir of my fandom for the Giants. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I heard people talk about real estate. I have no sense of what the current deals are with their real estate and such. But I do remember in the 50s, in particular in the 50s, they had a lot of real estate in Minneapolis, and they mishandled it. And it affected the team, as everyone knows. If you lose money, it's not good. And my dad, who owned 3 shares of stock in the Giants, would go to the stockholders meeting, and they always called on him because all he wanted to do was talk about baseball. All the other stockholders wanted to talk about how bad the company has been mismanaged, their real estate and other financial assets. So I just wanted to bring that up and say that dealing with real estate has not been their forte for many, many years. It's just not just a new thing. Having said all of that, I really love you guys. I will be a loyal member here, and I appreciate all the conversation.
Thanks for the compliments, Neil. Appreciate it. Mr. O'Doul, you are up.
Hello, Kerry, fellow native son.
Hey,
How you
Tom.
doing, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. We missed you. We missed you on the patio. You got to come back with Marty on pregame shows.
Oh, I'll be back out there.
Okay, I'll be there too. Okay, good to see you.
Good to see
One
you.
quick question. You're talking about our new acquisition. You said he has a lot of speed. Do you think the Giants are going to start playing a little more small ball and instead of trying to hit for the fence all the time?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I think it's something that's desperately needed right now because it's just really hard when you've got players who didn't come through your farm system to sign free agents who hit 40 home runs. Those players don't come around very often. Aaron Judge was a free agent last offseason, but he went back to the Yankees. And so I think what's easier is to develop a style of play within your own organization that you can get free agents from the outside who are speedy, who can play good defense, and then win with pitching. Because I think it's easier to sign pitchers to come to Oracle Park than it is to sign hitters with how big the outfield is. And so I do think that they're going to go back to the style of play that we saw when this team was so successful in 10, 12, and 14. And look, it's not going to happen overnight. This might take until 2030, but that's got to be the organization's mission right now.
I mean, the ballpark has become a little more home run friendly since they brought the fences and moved the bullpens out in the outfield. I mean, it used to be 421, that's at 415.
Yeah.
So there's a little more chance for home runs there. But fans come to see home runs. They're not like me. I'd rather see a real tight, close game with a lot of good defense and a lot of good base running, steals, stuff like that. So
yeah,
but good to see you, Kerry. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you on the patio.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Renee, you are up.
Kerry, it's great seeing you, and I appreciate all the info you're putting out there. But your last conversation really bleeds into what I was about to ask you, which is analytics. I have a problem with it. I mean, it's really hurting the game. This small ball running, speed, all the stuff that has hampered the game, that has forced players to go launch angle and pitchers to only pitch 3 innings. Are we seeing a change slowly with the Giants with the new management core? Your thoughts and your feelings about analytics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, analytics are just data. And it's how much are analytics influencing your decisions? Because if you're a team like the Giants under Gabe Kapler, you've got a chart in your dugout that's saying, 54% of the time you should use the right-handed hitter. When in reality, look, if that left-handed hitter is Brandon Crawford and you've seen him come through 10 years in clutch situations, and it doesn't matter if there's a left-hander on the mound, you know that this guy is going to deliver for you because
Art.
yeah, he's been there and done that, and he's got that track record. Then you throw out the chart. And I think that, look, there is a trend in baseball that's a little bit like, okay, there was such an overcorrection and everyone was hustling to use analytics and incorporate them that teams lost sight of what wins games. And so we're starting to see teams revert back to, look, they're never going to go back to what they were in, even the year 2000 when the Giants opened the ballpark and numbers weren't influencing everything. But we're starting to see a regression of how much teams actually rely on these things. And it's why having everyday players on the roster is now important, like a Jung-Hoo Lee will be, and having pitchers who can get you 7 or 8 innings like a Logan Webb can get you. That's really important. And so those players are going to get paid, and the teams that use those players are going to win more games, I think.
Thank you.
Mr. Klink, you are up. Bill, unmute.
I'm unmuted. I live by the Gary rule about muting. But Renee actually kind of tipped me off on something as far as a kind of a change in culture. Maybe we're going to be getting away from the analytics. Do you think that with Bob Melvin that we're going to get away more from that? And two, do you think that some of the acquisitions have Bob's fingerprints on them? I know he's just one part of the cog, but I'm wondering how much input you think he's having and what he's going to do with analytics looking forward.
Well, one thing to remember with Bob Melvin is the A's were the organization that used analytics almost before anyone. And so he knows all the numbers and he knows how to use them, but he also has experience not using them. He has experience being in the dugout for 10 seasons. And I think he's now been a manager for 4 or 5 different teams, 20 seasons, and saying, this number is valuable and it tells us something. But, if I've got Matt Chapman up at the plate or I've got Buster Posey up at the plate, I don't want to pinch hit for those players. I want to see them out on the field every day and give them this opportunity. And I think that he's going to be a good blend for the Giants because you don't want to go all the way back all at once so that, your current players, like a Logan Webb, all he's ever known is an analytics era. But, Logan Webb is bucking the trends because he's able to throw 7 innings. He's proving he deserves that. There are certain players in the organization who may benefit from numbers. There are certain players in the organization who you may just say, go to the batting cage today. Don't worry about looking at a chart before today's game. I think that Bob Melvin does a really good job having a feel for who those players are. So I think that it won't be forced on certain people, maybe the way it was.
Do you think maybe we'll get a bit of a bounce in terms of wins, just under kind of a fresh start? I'm not sure. Maybe you have a feeling in the clubhouse how the feeling was about Kapler at the end. We needed a fresh start. I'm wondering if the players are going to, if they're going to take a different attitude towards this whole thing with a new manager.
I'll tell you, everyone that I met, and granted, the last time I was really in there consistently was the year when they won 107. They really liked his approach. But I think that he's a personable person when you're in the dugout with him, when you're in the clubhouse with him, because he's a good listener. And so if you have a complaint to air, if you're upset about your playing time, he'll listen to you. But I think that the bottom line is a manager can only take you so far in the regular season. You have to have talent to win games in the regular season. I think managers help you win a lot more in the postseason. I think the best managers shine when they're not afraid to make tough calls on the biggest stages. But when it's May 17th and you're deciding whether you want to give Casey Schmidt one more at bat or, go in with a left-hander off the bench, that's where the Giants will benefit a little bit from Bob Melvin saying, you know what, let's give this kid a shot. Let's give this kid the opportunity to win a job in the future. So I don't know about a bump right away, but you will see a little bit of a culture shift in that regard.
Thank you. Good information. Thank you.
Kerry, you got time for a couple more?
Yeah, I got about 5 minutes here.
Mr. Goldfarb, would you like to ask Kerry a question?
Actually, no, because everybody covered
Oh my
everything
God.
that, yeah, that I don't want to sound like, gee, I knew all this, but he's hit all the points. He talked about a dysfunctional organization starting at the top with Johnson. We talk about spending money on real estate rather than the team. It just seems like the one thing that the Giants never can develop is a good scouting system, a good development group. And I hate to say it, but I don't know how the freaking Dodgers do it, but they do it. Just tell me, did they take a look at that? I mean, at one time when Farhan came here, we were in the top 5 of farm systems. Now we're back to 15. This guy is this. Unfortunately, I was a big believer in him, but he reminds me more and more of Evans.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that is so hard when you're identifying talent and putting an organization together. Sometimes people have the golden touch, and I don't know if you guys know the story of Dick Tidrow and the work that he did in the Giants organization, but Dick Tidrow was the scout who found Matt Cain in Tennessee out of high school. He signed off on Tim Lincecum when he had the unconventional delivery coming out of the University of Washington. He knew all about Madison Bumgarner coming out of high school in North Carolina. And in the 4th round of the 2014 draft, right before Dick Tidrow was kind of ready to step back and take a different role in the organization, he advocated that the Giants should take the high school right-hander who was a football player, Logan Webb.
Logan Webb, yep.
So some people are just blessed with the gift to see it. And Dick Tidrow and Giants fans are forever indebted to the work that he did for the organization. Because
Can we get him back?
Well, unfortunately, he died.
He passed away.
So he hasn't gone to the Dodgers.
So is there a look-see at the way we're developing players or not developing players?
Yeah, I think there's, you always try to copy the best organizations and the people who do it the best. But in the end, to me, it just comes down to some people are going to make decisions over the course of their careers where it's clear that 20 years later they had the golden touch. And, right now you hope that there's someone in the Giants organization who has that touch. With the guys that they drafted this year, I really like their 1st-round pick. He's a 6'7" guy who swings a little bit like Bryce Harper. There's another high school kid they took who's got a lot of potential out of Colorado. And you just hope that they're not making the wrong decisions, because for all the Dick Tidrows out there, there's 50 people who are saying, get this guy who will never make it to the major leagues. It's probably the toughest job in all of baseball.
Maybe Friedman knew that Farhan, he's a smart guy. There's no question about it. But maybe that's why they let him go.
He also bumped his salary up about 6 times.
I just, it looks like it's going to be another long season.
Let's hope not.
But Gary, let's be honest.
It's December. It's December.
You know what, Joe? We'll talk about. Kerry's going to go. I'm just going to ask him a couple of quickies. Fire away, Kerry. When is your next new show going to be on?
Well, hopefully I'll be able to finish editing one by 10 this evening, so it'll be up tomorrow morning, and then tomorrow night on KMBR for 2 hours talking Giants baseball from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern, all Giants talk.
free agents and trades. Who
Yeah.
do you see? Who do you see them signing, and who possibly could they acquire?
Whoa, this is tough. I think that they're in on Matt Chapman, Yamamoto, Blake Snell. It's who agrees to their money. And so that's the hard part to tell. With trades, I really like Corbin Burns of the Milwaukee Brewers. I think that Corbin Burns should be their top trade target this offseason if they're getting pitching.
And lastly, ramifications of Oakland leaving Vegas on the Giants.
Look, there are people who would have gone to A's games who are now going to show up to Giants games because they want to go to a baseball game that night, and that's going to mean more money in the pockets of Giants owners and more money that the Giants can spend. So I didn't want to see the A's go. I loved going to games at the Coliseum. I thought that the A's could be fun to root for at times, but it's Giants owners aren't sad to see them go, no matter what they say.
All right, guys, let's give it up for Kerry Crowley. Kerry, can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Fabulous. And you guys, I think you heard enough tonight that you know you should go to his podcast and subscribe. Hope to see you again soon. Don't be a stranger. Hop on board sometime, right?
Anytime. Thanks so much for having me.
Be well, okay? All right, I'm going to shut down the room, and I'm going to shut the recording, and we'll hang out here, talk baseball.